Lord, I wish to let you know that I am strongly inclined for the Beagle Bay mission. But really, my Lord, I am at present groping in the dark as regards God's will, and at a loss to know what the work is like. I've heard a little bit about it that makes me shudder. Still, if God has called me to the Beagle Bay mission, I am ready and willing to sacrifice my feelings for this work.
In 1907, 9 Sisters of St John of God, under the watchful eye of Mother Antonio O'Brien, set sail from Perth on a journey of over 2,500 kilometres to the remote Kimberley coast in the far northwest of Australia. They were headed for a world far removed from anything they'd ever experienced. All but one had come from Ireland.
Very smooth, a good landing.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Sorry, Nevin. Had some trouble with the keys.
Today we're celebrating Sister Bernadette's Diamond Jubilee. The sisters are flying in from Derby and they're driving in from Broome. So we're just getting the flowers ready for the altar. Big day.
Today there are 12 Sisters of St John of God left in the Kimberley. They live together in convents in Broome, Derby and Beagle Bay.
This is all for you, Sister Bernadette.
With an average age of 78, most are now retired, but they have all played an integral part in the care and education of Aboriginal people throughout the Kimberley.
We had nothing and we were children of mothers.
Well, our mothers were what they call the stolen generation, the half-castes.
Taken from different areas and brought to the mission here, and they were read and sent out to work for, I always say, good Catholic white ladies.
When Irish eyes are smiling, world seem bright and gay, and when Irish eyes are
The sisters have now been in the Kimberley for almost 100 years. Their story is intimately linked with the history of Aboriginal people throughout the last century. In the early days of the 20th century, life in the northwest was tough, even by the standards of the day. The promise of gold, rich pastoral lands, and even richer pearling grounds had lured many men to the region over the last 4 decades, with often catastrophic results for Aboriginal people. Many Aborigines were drawn to station camps and lived off rations. Those that could work became stockmen or domestics for the white station owners. Along the coast and throughout the Kimberley, Aboriginal people traded whatever resources they had in order to survive. Pearl shell was found in abundance along the northwest coast. In the early days, Aboriginal men, women and children were enlisted to collect shell from reefs and shallow bays. Gradually, they began to dive for shell from small dinghies.
The first divers that went down were Aboriginal women. No scuba diving equipment, no anything, just free diving. And a lot of pearling up here don't believe that.
Get it up here, come on! What's wrong with you?
Women were forced to dive for up to 10 hours a day in exchange for basic rations. They were easily exploited and often sexually abused and received little or no protection from the law. As pearl shell was no longer found in shallow waters, the era of deep-sea diving commenced. Aboriginal divers were no longer needed as thousands of indentured Asiatic workers arrived in Broome to work the pearl luggers. Countless hours were spent on the seabed in the search for shell. It was a lonely and dangerous occupation. Many suffered the painful effects of the bends. Many more were lost at sea. When the boats returned to shore, the men would either mourn the loss of a fellow crew member or celebrate their own survival. In 1907, Broome was a wealthy town, strictly divided according to race and class. The European pearling masters enjoyed all the trappings of a colonial lifestyle. They benefited greatly from an exemption to the White Australia policy that allowed Asian men to work in the pearling industry. Asian women were not permitted to accompany them. There were hundreds of young men with no female companionship, leading to many liaisons between the Asian boys and the local Aboriginal girls. Pearl luggers would often visit the tidal creeks along the coast for supplies of firewood and water. Some Aboriginal women were traded to the Asian crews for supplies of tobacco, flour and alcohol.
You know, some Aboriginal people used to go out to these places, you know, where the boats were. And, you know, some of the women had babies from these Asiatics.
My mother, her mother, she got hooked to a Filipino man, because there was a lot of Asiatic around the coast, you know.
So long as there is a traffic in human flesh between certain gross and unscrupulous men, and so long as I consider that the blacks are being cruelly treated, I shall not cease to raise my voice.
By the early 1900s, the treatment of Aboriginal people in Western Australia had become a public scandal. As a young priest, Matthew Gibney had spent time in the northwest. Now Bishop of Perth, he was a tireless advocate for the rights of Aboriginal people. Eventually, the government bowed to pressure and in 1904 held the Roth Royal Commission. This led to the passing of the Aborigines Act of 1905, which had a major effect on the welfare and status of Aboriginal people for decades to come.
Now this is that citizenship rights I had to get to become free from the Aboriginal Act. I had to get this so I could travel freely, run our own business. With this I could have married a white woman as far as that goes, but I was already married. I had to be examined by a doctor, see if I was in good health, and then had to go to court before a magistrate and the Shire president. And I had to dissociate myself with my own relations, my friends. That's the law was set, the Aboriginal policy, which was bad actually, very bad.
The most dramatic provision of the Act created the new office of Chief Protector of Aborigines, who was made legal guardian, in effect the parent, of all Aboriginal and half-caste children under the age of 16 in Western Australia. The sisters arrived in Beagle Bay with little knowledge of the world that lay ahead of them. In 1907, the mission was a struggling community of German Palatine priests and brothers and local Aborigines. The mission was desperately poor, badly resourced, and on the brink of losing the meagre government subsidies they relied upon. The arrival of the nuns was greeted as a turning point for the beleaguered mission. Under the guidance of Mother Antonio, the young sisters began a new life in this wild and rugged frontier. But the world they encountered was not everything they had been led to expect.
When we came in 1907, they said the natives would spear and eat us. I consider them the most lovable and law-abiding people in the world.
Conditions at the mission were a huge shock to the sisters. Even the convent Mother Antonio had been promised by both Bishop Gibney and the Palatines was nothing more than a rough bark hut. But the sisters endured the hardships and brought a much-needed lightheartedness to the lives of the people.
When the sisters arrived, they really invigorated the Aboriginal people there. The Germans were a very technical, a very straight-up sort of group of people. They tried to model Beagle Bay Mission on the tenets of German efficiency, but it didn't set well on the shoulders of the Aboriginal people because they weren't really geared to German efficiency, if anybody is, but they certainly weren't.
The sisters were mostly Irish and pretty sort of affectionate and open and whatnot. So the people trusted them and took to them. There was little that the nuns didn't bring in terms of what mattered most. In other words, the creation and growth of a stable community, a community of happy people.
I arrived in Derby on Sunday morning into 120 degrees in January. But my first impressions were, will I ever breathe again?
The first cup of tea I had, I never forgot that. I said to myself, oh, powdered milk.
All kinds of bugs appeared in the evenings and sundown, things biting and crawling around.
I went to one of the sisters and I said, oh, I'd like a towel for my shower. And she said, but I gave you one yesterday. And I said, yeah, but I used that.
I was born in Sheep Hills, Victoria. At the age of 12, I wanted to look after Aboriginals, look after lepers, and become a sister of St John of God. I was 23 then. I didn't think my father would let me come, but however, he did. And we arrived in Broome. One of the sisters had to come down from Beagle Bay to meet us, because women were not allowed in Broome during the war. And we went to Beagle Bay on the back of a truck with flour, etc., etc. We were sitting on top of these bags of flour. We got into Beagle Bay about 8 o'clock at night. Our tea was there. They were expecting us earlier, but it was a cold fried egg on an enamel plate. I can still see that. I didn't know what I was going into. I just had to do it, and that was it. We were 6 months as postulants, like sort of on probation. Then after that 6 months you were received. This would have been first profession. I had long hair when I came. It was cut off. First thing I do is check the water and the electricity. Well, there could be a leak in the pipe. I'm maintenance. And there could be a leak in the pipe, it could be wasting water.
We could leave it on.
I'm maintenance, yes. I wanted to be there, so I had to stay there. Although there were all sorts of things that were so contrary to what I'd been used to. I mean, the climate, people, everything was so different.
We feel intensely happy and delighted with our little convent and its surroundings, and above all, with the affectionate little children. Pray for us, my Lord, that we may be mothers and sisters to them in every sense of the word.
Prior to the arrival of the nuns, there were only 7 girls at the mission. A year later, there were 70.
Chief Protector Mr. Gale visited the mission and seemed pleased with the improvement, and each time he brought more children. They were brought almost naked and often only dressed in a man's coat or shirt. They were often wild little savages, but after some months became quite happy.
The half-caste is intellectually above the Aborigine. I would not hesitate for one moment to separate any half-caste from its Aboriginal mother, no matter how frantic her momentary grief may be at the time. They soon forget their offspring.
Well, we knew that was going on all the time. We knew all the time. You know, where our mothers used to cover us up with chalk or whatever, mud or something to make us look black.
Charcoal.
And hide us in caves.
Because they were after
they were after half-caste children.
Back then, Aboriginal people were classified as flora and fauna. You know, our full-blood people were animals. But the moment you had a kid who was half-caste, it was like, well, wait there, we have a responsibility now because that kid's half-white, but don't worry about the full-blood people.
Oh, they were real cruel, you know, when you think about it. And even today, there's some of them still looking for their mother.
My mother was a victim of the removal of children too. And she only had the nuns to turn to.
It wasn't the missionaries, it was the government. Government against our parents having us, you know.
The John of God sisters certainly weren't instrumental in removing Aboriginal children at all, but they were involved in the care of Aboriginal children who were removed.
The Chief Protector had the power to bring children in, but did not have the resources to look after them. The Church encouraged the government authorities to bring the children to the mission.
The children, both half-caste and black, should be removed from centres of vice, such as Broome and other places, and brought to this or any other institution which is working in the interests of the blacks. If the police sent me only the most obvious cases, the number of children in the mission would be about 200.
The more children brought to Beagle Bay, the higher the government subsidies. The mission had tried for years to be self-sustaining, with no success. The subsidies were small, but provided the base income that enabled the mission to continue.
They picked up the kids from Kimberley's, what they call the stolen generations, take them to the mission and said, yeah, well, in other words, yeah, you're going to look after and feed them. They gave some money, but very little.
For Mother Antonio, the task of the missionary was simple. Her aim was to civilise and evangelise the local people.
A few displayed the remnants of clothing, but for the most part the women were naked. It's no reflection on anyone's courage that the sisters couldn't bear the sight of unclad women around the house.
In stark contrast to the Aboriginal women, the sisters were clothed in heavy wool habits.
Those nuns in those days, they didn't have air condition, and they were dressed up with those veils, and they had on top of it, you know, over their heads there with that thing. And you must realise how hot it must have been for them. You know, they must have sweltered.
We were just sopping wet all the way down to about our hips. We'd be wet through.
The habit divided you from family, from the ordinary person in the street, as it were, and symbolically it was meant to assist you in leaving the world.
For the sisters, conditions in Beagle Bay were far from easy. With no independent means of support, they were reliant on the priests and brothers for all their worldly needs.
Because they were strong women, they found it in many cases difficult with the dominance, particularly of the priests, and that again was church life of the time.
After a year at the mission, Mother Antonio decided to establish a convent on her own terms. She took one other sister and headed to the wild port town of Broome. By 1908, Broome was an oriental shantytown that had more in common with its Asian neighbours than it did with the rest of Australia. After weeks at sea, hurling crews would return to shore, determined to blow their hard-earned cash. Amongst the narrow alleys and laneways, Sheba Lane became a notorious centre of prostitution. Visitors were shocked by wild scenes of drinking and gambling. There was even a sprinkling of opium dens.
You can imagine, you got 6,000 Asians here and 6 coppers. There was a lot of fightings, and I put it down to the 3 Gs, It was either drug, gambling, or girls.
There was more coloured people than white people. And it was like busy all the time.
In contrast to the wealthy pearling masters, hundreds of Asian workers lived in ramshackle camps along the foreshore. But the Aborigines were even lower on the social scale. Some were employed as house servants and labourers, but the majority lived in fringe camps on the edge of town. After an arduous journey by sea, Mother Antonio and Sister Mary Benedict arrived in Broome, unknown, unannounced, and without a penny to their name.
This is the site of the little dwelling when the sisters first came to Broome, and a Filipino man got out of a little shack and gave it to the sisters. It was only a corrugated iron shack, and it must have been very hot. This little slab of cement is supposed to be the size of the original building. I have no idea how they would have lived here. I don't know how they could have lived here.
If only we could get a net or two, we could use them to get a good night's sleep. Instead, we make do with cans of smoking sticks placed in every nook and corner. The invariable order is, don't scratch, and we don't, for fear of getting the maladies associated with bites.
The community of Broome reacted very positively to the sisters. They certainly were enamored by their cheerful personalities, their laughter, their help in the community.
The sisters' first goal was to open a school for local children. There were objections when several Aboriginal children attended, but the sisters held out to keep them. Within a short time, they had attracted many of the town's children, regardless of race and religion.
From that point on, they're given donations, not only from the Manilaman or the Filipinos, but also from a group of Irish pearling masters who are very well-to-do and get along very well with the Irish sisters and help them with what they need.
The sisters taught by day and often nursed at the government hospital by night. In a move that upset the Broome establishment, the Japanese were granted permission to have their own doctor and hospital, provided the nursing staff were European. With their workload stretched to the limit, Mother Antonio reluctantly agreed to allow the newly arrived Sister Immaculata to nurse at the Japanese hospital. Her dedication typified the attitude of the sisters. After 3 years nursing patients with the bends, typhoid, and even smallpox, she died of typhoid at the age of 26. Her funeral brought the town to a standstill. The Japanese especially mourned her loss and erected a large Celtic cross in her memory. Back at Beagle Bay, the declaration of war in 1914 put the German Palatine priests and brothers in a tenuous position. Financial support from Germany was cut off, and they found themselves under threat of internment for the duration of the war. Bishop Gibney negotiated for them to remain at the mission, but their movements were strictly monitored. As a reaction to the turmoil both here and in Europe, they unveiled a grand plan to construct a cathedral in Beagle Bay. Against all logic, and to the bewilderment of the sisters, the project began.
In 1914, when the World War was on, 5 German religious men with the new Aboriginal peoples of Beagle Bay, they built a monument of peace. It was being built here by our Aboriginal peoples. Both my parents worked here, and then many more other men and women. It was the homemade bricks and the lime were being made here. You know, the old people used to go out and down to the beach and gather up cockle shells, and the donkey cart would go out and bring the shells in and cooked the shells there, and the beautiful white lime came out of it then.
The church was completed in 1918, built entirely from local materials. It was constructed of 60,000 bricks, handmade by the people of Beagle Bay. The altar gleamed with pearly mosaics.
There are real pearls in that, proper pearls. The Hamaguchi gave me those when I put them in there. It's in the tabernacle. You go right close up. They're real pearls. They're worth a good bit of money, those. The proper pearls. No, they're real pearls. But it's marvellous work done in this church when you see. I was asleep in my bed really, but I wasn't asleep, but I should be asleep. And I heard something falling, and I said, I bet you that's the old tower come down. And the whole thing had fallen.
It happened about 11:30 in the night, and just as well it happened at that time, because if it was during the day, there would have been children playing around here, or if it happened during a service or something like that, a lot of people would have got hurt.
Luckily, the pearl shell tabernacle survived.
The missionaries have established hospitals throughout the vicariate where the native people are receiving the best of medical attention. Many are suffering from leprosy, once considered incurable.
I had just finished my nursing training. I knew nothing about leprosy. I had to learn. And I hadn't had anything to do with grown-up Aboriginals.
Isolated cases of leprosy had occurred in the Kimberley from as early as 1870, introduced by Asian crews working the pearl luggers. Highly contagious, it spread amongst Aboriginal people in the same way as influenza, smallpox and measles.
There was a huge fear of leprosy. It was very much associated with the police, and of course that's another problem. It was the police in many cases bringing them in.
It took years for the government to recognise the extent of the problem. Eventually they established a leprosarium outside of Derby in 1937. The sisters volunteered as nurses and worked at the leprosarium for almost 50 years, until its closure in 1986. At the height of the epidemic, there were 350 patients and only 3 nursing sisters. The diagnosis of leprosy was often a life sentence. Once identified with the disease, people were separated from their families and held within the confines of the leprosarium.
Quite a few people from here went. We couldn't understand, what it was, and, that we all heard that, they had to go there. And we didn't know how serious the disease were.
It was a bit of a shock. My mother was nursing, and a friend, an Asian friend, and she caught it.
It's tough love when you had to identify a child in school and you were required to identify them if you thought they had leprosy. Now that's tough love, because you know that that child is going to be taken from their family and put out at the leprosarium. And in the time I'm talking about, there wasn't a cure.
Yeah, when we had visitors or family, they used to come and visit us. They weren't allowed to touch us or come near us. They had to sit that far away from us.
Well, before they got into the room, they got their medicine on the veranda here. Then they all went in there. We checked everyone for their feet and hands to see if there were any injuries. They all had their feet and hands bathed, and any that need dressings had dressings done. In the early days, yes, the treatment was shalmugra. The oil was heated over a stove and injected hot into the patient's lesions. It was terribly painful, but they endured it because they thought it was going to do them some good. But it was really useless.
This photo here, see this baby here? That's me. My mom was sick in Derby, Bangor, and she had leprosy.
A baby born at the leprosarium was taken straight from the mother. Well, that was dreadful for the mother. She couldn't even touch that child.
The nuns cut the cord and I was then sent to Beagle Bay. This is 4 of us that I've got a photo of that was born at Derby Leprosarium and taken away. But there could be more, over 30 odd children born there and taken out and put on the missions. So yeah, this is another old photo I kept. Didn't think that it'd come in handy one day.
Mother Alphonsus, she used to be with the music, you know, and taught us how to play instruments. And you wouldn't believe all those people that they'd never even been at school, you know, never learned nothing, couldn't read or write. But when they started playing, they used to play all classical music.
Because they're musical and because they just loved music so much, it gave them a break from the awful monotony of being closed away from people. If they hadn't had music in the evenings, what were they supposed to do, go to bed and do nothing?
Over a period of 50 years, around 1,200 people were brought to the leprosarium. Many would never see their country again. By the late 1930s, the convent in Broome was home to 20 sisters. Around half still came from Ireland.
There were walls, great big walls right around the convent, 6 foot. And we used to hear the music and we used to go peeping through the hole in the walls and we used to watch all the young nuns. Used to do the Highland fling and do the sailor's hornpipe, isn't it? They used to do the dance.
From the time the sisters first arrived in Broome, girls had been brought to the convent and placed in their care. Many girls grew up in the convent with the sisters.
In 1939, when there were actually 16 girls living in the convent and the sisters were providing all of the funds to care for them, it was nothing to do with the government, they received a bequest. The sisters got together and decided that what they needed to do with that money was to build a home for the children. And that's what became Holy Child Orphanage.
There was Mother Margaret in charge. Well, she would have had all that knowledge of the children, where they came from, and she would have had all the history of them. But we wouldn't have known any of that.
The reason I went into the convent was my mother was blind and unable to look after me. And an old man by the name of Willie Menardo was looking after me, and he took me to the nuns and asked them would they take me in.
They were taken away. They were taken away from them and sent to the orphanage. Some of them had parents, some of them had no parents.
It was the policy of the Native Welfare Department at the time, whether it was right or wrong, but they thought for the betterment of the children to bring them in for education. I mean, the Broome ones, the waifs and strays that came in from Broome, I just don't know what would have happened to them.
I didn't even question it. I didn't think about it. They were just, as far as I was concerned, they were Broome children. But now...
I never sort of queried anything. I just looked after them when they came in. I didn't have time to be questioning anything.
I wouldn't say that any of the sisters are in denial. I think the sisters were innocent people who had been brought in by the church. It was the government that's in denial, not the church and not the sisters that grew them up.
I have happy memories. The nuns walked with us through the good days and the not so bad days, because we all came through.
With the outbreak of World War II in the Asia-Pacific region, all Japanese nationals, even those who had been part of the community for the past 40 years, were expelled from Broome. Broome was attacked by Japanese warplanes, on March the 3rd, 1942.
When they first bombed Broome, there was only coloured people here. All the white people left. They shot through. Even the doctor shot through.
What happened with World War II? The government catered for all the Europeans to be flown, or the ship was waiting for them to send them to Perth. But what happened to us? And we had a footwalk or whatever, by hook or by crook. Leave, just vacate Broome, wasn't it?
Yeah, everybody
and
had to get
Beagle
out of
Bay.
town.
Yeah.
All Aboriginal people living in Broome, including those at the orphanage, were sent to Beagle Bay. The sisters refused to go south when other Europeans were evacuated. They remained in the Kimberley alongside the Aboriginal people. Around 3,000 Australian troops occupied Broome for the duration of the war.
And then when we came and stayed here, the nuns took us to the novitiate. And the novitiate was a beautiful big building, but there wasn't enough room that only the babies were on the verandas of the novitiate. And us older ones, we just slept out in the yard like that.
There was enormous pressure put on the mission. It just didn't have the facilities to cope, and they really didn't get much outside help at all.
When the war ended, many people returned to Broome, but the dormitories at Beagle Bay were still full of children.
We had one big dormitory for the bigger girls, and another one used to be for the teenagers, and the next one was for little ones going to school.
By the mid-1950s, Beagle Bay was considered a model Catholic mission.
The sisters must bring to their task tremendous patience and perseverance. The Aboriginal children find classwork difficult after the free and easy life with their tribe. However, if they can be prevailed upon to give full attention to their lessons, they are capable of keeping up the standard.
Well, they gave me the best. I didn't go to college or any other place. Just here in Beagle Bay. St. John of God Nuns was my teacher.
The kids didn't have much, and you looked at society and you saw what is there for them. You've got to kind of get up and do the best you can with what you have, and it's no good sitting down and crying about what you don't have, because this is the reality of life.
The sisters' focus was now on the education and training of Aboriginal children in Beagle Bay, Broome and Derby. There was a strong emphasis on the training of girls in domestic duties.
Well, they taught all the young girls how to work and sew and cook and all that. They taught them everything most of the girls know today.
We have an old cliche, why we went to the mission, We went to the mission not only to get educated, but domesticated,
They taught us a lot. How to wash and iron and to clean your house, everything.
What good they got out of the church, what good they got out of the nuns and the sisters. The ability to comprehend Western culture, because they don't know what they left behind.
They taught us commitments and hard work, commitments, and to strive.
Mission life was regulated by a daily routine of prayer, domestic chores and schooling. Strict rules and discipline determined the behaviour of both the sisters and the children.
Yeah, really tough, but they were really good. In those days, they should do a little bit of smacking, If you're being naughty or something, just a couple of smack on the bum.
I was considered as a young sister to be very strict and very hard in the classroom, and I'll have girls say to me now, "Oh, sister, you were hard."
I wasn't game enough to complain to them about the nuns. I know my mother would say, "Good job."
If you were walking around, they'd give you this one here, mate. None of this, beg your pardons or anything like that. They were tough.
It was tough, but it was worth it. I'll say it was worth it.
In Beagle Bay, we'd take the children out in the truck for picnics each Sunday.
They used to ask us, would you like to go for a walk like after lunch or Sundays? Yes, please, sister, we should be so happy to go for a walk. We used to show them bush fruit what we used to get.
Inspired by the children's relationship to country, the sisters developed a strong affinity for the Kimberley. Their outings provided a welcome break from the oppressive routine of convent life.
Well, the rule wouldn't allow us to speak to one another, except a couple of times each year. Special days, St. John of God Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, whatever. And but we had no library, we had no books, no newspapers.
I think we didn't talk until after Mass in the morning, or even after breakfast, from memory. But it was coming to the stage where you could.
Those women who survived up here were strong women, the women who came through, and they had a very strong relationship with one another. That doesn't mean to say they would always have agreed with one another.
Everyone was in the same boat. That was the sort of life that you lived if you were a sister, and I didn't question things. And I suppose if you did question things and you were disruptive, then they wouldn't keep you. You would be sent home.
Sister Bernadette, she came out from Ireland when she was 21. Most of the time she was either looking after children or looking after girls in the dormitory or in the orphanage. But she also worked in the kindergarten in Derby, and she worked in the leprosarium in Derby. A lot of the women hold her in high regard, but some of them call her mum, because she was the only mum they knew at the time.
Good morning. How are you? Are you feeling all right?
Yeah.
You got any pain anywhere? No? This too. What I see. Hey, what'll I do with him? Here. Bow. That's him. That's him. I'm looking for him. Bow. Oh, what shall I do with the dog? He'll kill him now. I'm looking over here. Come here, come here. Bow, bow. Stop. Oh, you naughty boy. Look at him underneath. Well, what good is hitting him? I hate hitting him so. And I can't tie him up all the time. Everywhere I go, come on, good boy. Come on, you come home. He shouldn't be down here, you know.
Hey, Mom, I can just taste your fish up and right. I'm coming back home to you. Can't act the pace of the city life. Soon I'll be dreaming in Broome.
The late 1960s and early 70s represented a time of tremendous change. All Aboriginal people now had citizenship and the right to vote. The sisters were also dealing with massive changes arising from the Vatican II Council.
Getting rid of the habit meaning the clothing that we were used to, and that was a big event for lots of people, you know, and a big change.
I was a young sister at that time, and it was an exciting time.
They've had to change, we had to change, everybody had to, adjust, I suppose. And I think within this town, we've been able to do that.
The energy and exuberance of Brand New Day captured the spirit of a new era for Aboriginal people.
That's what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to be a processional hymn.
Brand New Day was, it was part of the exciting times and expressed all of these feelings, the movements, the change in church relationships, the change in Aboriginal people's own lifestyles, the things they were grappling with this brand new day that they were coming into.
There's nothing I would rather be than to be an Aborigine and dream of just what heaven must be like.
I think that's what Brand New Day does. Feeling comfortable enough to make fun and laugh with the missionaries.
Do you believe? We believe! Are you Christians? Yes! You will find, if you're true to yourself, that it's all an illusion. The books on your shelf.
Our favourite fans were the nuns and the priests, especially the nuns. And if you sing Town by the Bay, they love that song. And because you got that Jimmy wrote in that way, like that Irish influence. If I can do like Irish, why are you crying, my pretty collie?
Why are your eyes filled with tears? Let me come over and dry your eyes and tell you the way that I feel.
Illegal thing and pulling it before the bishop. Here we go. Can I pull? You got that one.
Age-old superstition, deeply ingrained in the minds of the adult Aboriginals, has made the task of converting the grown-ups an extremely difficult one. The only real hope for the future is with the children, who come under the influence of the sisters at a very early age.
Stolen means someone that had been forcibly removed from either father or mother or brothers and sisters that had been separated from their family, placed in institutions.
The 1995 inquiry into the stolen generation opened many wounds for Aboriginal people. It also forced the sisters to examine their role in this complex history.
The package had to be opened, as it were.
For the first time, people had the opportunity to look in the mirror and see themselves as a person who suffered under government policy.
It was a valuable thing for all of us, church people, government people, Aboriginal people and mainstream Australia who knew nothing of this story, to have the story put out there for them to really understand that these things did happen.
Those inquiries, I think, made them feel they have a right to say something for themselves as well. That, hey, I've been a little lamb in the orphanage, I've been a little lamb in Beagle Bay and I got feelings too.
Now, there's been a time of healing. There's been a time of Aboriginal people getting back some information, from the government, from their files, talking to each other, having time for counselling. Just time. Time heals and time allows people to think through and sort out what may have been said at the time in anger, with little information.
Most of my elders who call themselves Stolen Generation, who were removed from country, aren't bitter. They aren't bitter about being in the orphanage. They aren't bitter about the church. They aren't bitter about the government, but they are bitter about the government saying it didn't happen. We're not responsible. I'm not going to say sorry, because it did happen and you have to say sorry.
The sisters' response is to maintain contact with as many of the girls as they can. They've also moved to try and make available to the girls any information that they have, and that is something that they promise to do.
I really don't know why we've got so many, because the climate, the silverfish, we had no air conditioning. So I'm amazed at all the photos that we have and at all the documents that we've got.
Most of the photos and slides and whatever we're doing here, scanning and putting on CDs, most of it is from the nuns themselves. Anybody and everybody in the Kimberley was involved with the nuns, with the sisters. I'm going to try and find my grandmother on this computer. Try Angelina Phillips.
Comes up. Where Angelina Phillips is, there's a rectangle that locates her.
Yeah, she looks like my sister. That's why. Yeah, that's my grandmother. That's my dad's mom. It's the first Holy Communion in St. Mary's school children. I don't know what she was doing there. Well, it's for people on the Kimberley, so they'll have some background information to look at if they want to find out something for their ancestors or whatever, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, or for their children.
I think the sisters could sleep gracefully in their graves, knowing that they've done the best they can do, considering the era, the times, and the politics. Hallelujah.
It means a lot, mate. Everybody in the community has been baptized in the church, even our own parents, Ellie, our fathers and mothers, and our grandparents.
Why are you crying, my pretty Colleen? Why are your eyes filled with tears?
To conclude his visitation, the bishop gives solemn benediction, calling down God's blessing on these primitive people. So long forgotten and neglected, they are now, at long last, coming into the fold of Christ.
I still remember the old mission yard, the old days, the old ways, the times that were hard, the friends of...
Put so much holy water on it, it's never going to fall down here.
The fathers, the brothers, and the old Irish nuns. When the darkness is falling and passing of days, won't you share your new future in my town by the bay? All the way, Jesus, just all the way, Lord. Bend me and shape me, give me a reward. Let me lie in your body when I'm wrapped in my pain.
take me home?
Of course. No worries. Come on.
We're going to go.
Come on.
Yes, yes. We've achieved something.